We're going to start. Before we start, we're going to introduce Carla Thylan from the Montana Book Festival. She's going to tell you a little bit about the festival, then we're going to get into the pie and the whiskey. Thanks, y'all, for coming.
Hello. Hey, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out to... You can't hear? Okay, welcome. Thank you so much to everybody for coming out tonight and for being present for the 2017 Montana Book Festival. I am Carla Thylan. I am the director this year, and I have been in for just a whole lot of surprises, and most of them have been really good. And one of the most fun things today and in the last couple days have been seeing authors like in the street, and I know their faces because I've been trying to resize them to fit them into that little circle on the online schedule for a couple of months, and so I know that those details intimately. So glad to see everybody out. We have an amazing lineup this year, as I think is probably the case most years. But, you know, many of you have been out to events the last couple of days, but starting tomorrow, we're kind of picking things up a notch, and we're going to be having a lot of full days of programming. Tomorrow, I just welcome you all to come out and check out some of our Montana history panels and our historical writing panels. We're going to have some local favorites, Beth Judy, and some other folks reading some of their historical works. And I've got, you know, everything from short fiction, flash fiction, a lot of poets here. So pick up a schedule and check out montanabookfestival.org. All spelled out, nothing funny. So thank you so much. And when I first became the book festival director, there were three questions that I heard the most often. One was, is James Lee Burke coming? No, sorry. Is Sherman Alexie coming? Sorry. Is Pie and Whiskey going to be here again? And I was so thrilled to be able to say yes. And so here we are tonight, and we welcome once again to this stage here at the Union Club, Kate Lebo and Sam Ligon, and they will take it from here.
Thank you all for coming out. My name's Sam Ligon. This is Kate Lebo. This is our third Pie and Whiskey in Missoula. We've done 6 in Spokane. Our 7th in Spokane is going to be next month, October 26th. Where's the book? I have it. Oh, because the book Pie and Whiskey is coming out on October 24th. This is Pie and Whiskey, the book, which collects Pie and Whiskey readings. Thank you for coming, and before we start, I'm just going to say a couple of quick thank yous. Thank you to Garth Whitson and Shakespeare and Company. Garth, I know y'all remember when this festival stopped happening 6 years ago. Garth is the person who almost single-handedly brought it back. Right? No? Garth is saying no. But from my perspective, from what I've seen, a lot of people brought it back, but Garth did a lot of work to bring it back. Thank you, Garth. Also, thank you to Bernice's Bakery for sponsoring this event, though they did not bake the pies. Thanks to John Perugine and the Union Club for this awesome venue. They host this every year, which is fantastic. We love being at the Union Club. Thanks to Carla Thylan and all the staff and volunteers of the Montana Book Festival for making it all happen. Thanks to Jenny Montgomery and Montgomery Distillery for the amazing rye. Thanks to Judy Blunt over here. Judy made 15 of the pies. Kate and I made the 16 of the pies. Kate and I made the other ones. We're about to start. Kate's going to say a few words, and we're going to bring our first reader up. Thank y'all for coming.
I just want to say an extra thank you to Judy, too. I'm usually in this alone, but when I come to Montana, I know there will be twice as much pie, and it will be twice as good because Judy Blunt is at the oven. Thank you, Judy. All right, so Sam and I started Pie and Whiskey actually at the Port Townsend Writers Conference, kind of by accident. We just made some pies and got a bottle of whiskey, and we realized that with that combination, all of a sudden writers who before were kind of nervous and worried and socially anxious would just talk to each other. That was it. They would just talk to each other, and they found out that they liked each other, and that these substances very easily, sweetly, and spiritedly brought them together. So that is part of the inspiration behind this. This is a pie and whiskey is something that pretty much everybody agrees on, which feels incredibly important in a what's that? Talk louder? Okay. Pie and whiskey is something everybody can pretty much agree on is good, which feels particularly important in this incredibly weird political time that we're in. And pie and whiskey is not apolitical, but it is drawing on substances that pretty much everybody can get behind. So that is part of the spirit tonight. Thank you for joining us. Am I forgetting anything? All right, the first reader is Kevin Canty. Come on up.
Let's thank Sam and Kate one more time. Well done. This requires no introduction, I think. I hope. My grandmother Mabel drank whiskey every day. She never drank too much, at least not with the kids around, but she didn't skip a lot of days either. She was otherwise a strict woman, a high school librarian, a widow, and a landlady. Her opinions about her tenants were well-formed and quite firm, and if the tenants crossed the line, however invisible that line might be, they were gone. She prayed the rosary every morning before she rose, and again before she slept. Above her bed hung an enormous cross of dark wood with a gaunt, suffering Jesus dangling from it. 5 o'clock in the afternoon, though, she would take a break and mix herself a bourbon and ginger ale. She fetched the paper and settled in the dining room where the telephone was. She got the pack of Terrytons out of the drawer under the phone, lit a cigarette, and called her brother Eddie. Together, they discussed the next day's prospects at Golden Gate Meadows with the help of the racing form that ran every day in the Chronicle. Eddie was the youngest of 9 children and a well-established reprobate who spent every day at the racetrack. The two of them would spend a half hour working through the ins and outs of the ponies, and then Mabel would make the same bet she always did, putting $2 on the favorite to show in each race. This was an unexciting way to play the horses with no prospect of a big win, but she could afford to play them every day this way. She would have 1 drink and 2 cigarettes, place her bets, and then re-enter the rectitude of her everyday life. This was not the extent of her dissipation, though. Once a month, she would go visit Aunt Anne for lunch in the city, and if one of us was visiting, we might get to tag along. Anne was another of the younger sisters, married to a mystery man named Frank, who none of us had ever met. She was the main switchboard operator for the Fairmont Hotel, the fanciest in San Francisco. She had a limitless supply of gossip about celebrity guests. At least I assume so. I never heard any of it. I'd be sent on some errand while they sat at a banquette or booth, and when I came back, Mabel would be blushing. As a reward, I would get the maraschino cherry from her Manhattan. I can call back that flavor anytime. The intense red sweetness of the cherry coated with whiskey, which she never bothered to shake all the way off. Brown liquor at lunch, rosaries and racehorses. This all made one life for her, one seamless whole. She'd go to Easter Mass with our family, all dressed up, then spend the afternoon on the lawn of her rich brother's house, drinking Ramos gin fizzes. Whiskey wasn't bad for you. Cigarettes weren't bad for you. Gambling was just something you did. She lived in that world until she died. One day, when she was well into her 80s, my father offered her a Manhattan, and she looked at him with fear and surprise. She'd never seen him before. She shook it off, but we'd all seen it. That was the end coming for her. Though it took a few more years, she was 96 when she passed. But it wasn't her habits catching up with her. She got off scot-free from everything but time. Time had already taken Eddie, already taken Anne. It was coming for her. But she took the Manhattan from my father once she knew who he was, and she sipped it gracefully as if it was the cup of life itself.
Nice job, Kevin. Our next reader is Lindsay G.
I am short. Okay. Hi, everybody. Mom, teach me how to make pie crust, I say on Christmas Eve, plunking down my glass on the counter in the kitchen I grew up in. I say grew up in because the kitchen has always been the center of that house. Most of my childhood memories revolve around the long, dark walnut table in its center, especially memories of the sharp, sweet aroma of bourbon. My mother would drink it late at night while she read the paper, just a finger at a time on the rocks, from one of the vintage amber glasses that we used on special occasions. Those glasses, since the kids moved out, have moved down in the world. When I'm at home now, we drink water out of them with meals around the table. Tonight, I've refilled my water glass with bourbon. I arrived that afternoon from New York, and over dinner, I noticed that the walnut plank felt nearly as wide as it did when I was 5, when the no singing at the table rule was implemented. It was a rule that I had long assumed was universal, but discovered as an adult was tailor-made to counter my unceasing renditions of Little Girls from Annie, the Carol Burnett version. I have a vague recollection of bursting into the kitchen as a 5-year-old, dressed in my flimsiest slip and all of my plastic jewelry, belting, "Some women are dripping with diamonds." My grandfather, an attorney, was not amused. My singing henceforth had been deemed too much for the dinner table, just like my elaborate wedding ceremonies for my fish sticks and my chair squeak virtuoso performances. The table became the distance between me and my mother, a stand-in for my too muchness. Tonight, I felt that too muchness like a telescopic lens, lengthening and focusing the silences in our conversation. My mother's rushes to fill them before I said something about my life. The way, in response, I skirted the edges of my existence. There were miles of walnut that night. I started on the bourbon as soon as the dishes were cleared. My mother has told me that when I was a colicky, chronically ill, interminably wailing baby, she resisted the urge to lull me to sleep with bourbon. But I have my doubts. I don't know what, aside from a taste acquired in infancy, could account for my natural affinity for Kentucky's finest. I've always loved it. At restaurants, she would order a Manhattan, and I would hover, sniffing my appreciation. I'd beg loudly for a scrape of the bourbon orange slushies she concocted in summer. And when she baked her famous no-bake chocolate walnut bourbon cookies, I would swipe bites of dough. My predilection, I thought, connected me to her. But no, it was unsettling. It was too much. Not so, I've realized, with pie. I've never been asked to tone down my appreciation of my favorite of all foods, the exceptional pies that my mother turned out effortlessly. Custard pies, pecan pies, wild raspberry pies, apple crumb pies, strawberry rhubarb pies, even the occasional Amish shoofly pie, and the perfect flaky crust that she would roll out expertly from scratch. We drifted apart as my adulthood wore on, and I had tried to gain back some ground with baking. Mom gave me her crust recipe, and I spent evenings in my apartment in New York drinking bourbon and agonizing over the rolling pin, imagining the day when I would make crust like hers. We would finally have fodder for a full conversation. We'd talk flour to fat ratios, rolling pin techniques, the merits of thickening agents in the fillings. We'd just talk. As the years passed, though, my pie crust efforts stalled. I didn't have the knack. My only knack has always been for putting words on paper. That's the knack that got me here, to a book deal and a steady readership and renown in my field, which is sex-positive feminist journalism about pornography. That's the field that sustains me and has brought my wildest dreams of authorship to fruition, and which has driven a wedge wider than the kitchen table between me and Mom. More than the singing or the bourbon, it's the writing. More than the writing, it's the sex. And how I've always been interested in it. Too much. So, on Christmas Eve, I demand that she show me how to make pie crust. I can't wait for my crust to improve. The distance will only disappear, I decide, if we do this together and create a pristine apple pie for the extended family arriving tomorrow. They all, by the way, know what I do for a living. But at gatherings, they pretend not to, for my mother's sake. Much like the no singing at the table rule, we've all accepted that the no talking about Lindsay's life at family functions rule is universal. So now, she throws down flour on the countertop and watches me put the ingredients together. Flour, butter, a pinch of salt, a pinch of baking powder, cold water. It is the haiku of baking. So simple, but ineffable. I drink more bourbon as my pie crust fails to materialize. I sweat. I swear. At last, I give up. I take my seat at the far end of the table, defeated. My mother, apron strapped on and sleeves rolled up, swoops in. Within minutes, a flawless crust has materialized. My mom, the pie poet, puts my writing success to shame. She fills the crust with apples, sugar, butter, spices. A virtuoso. She is beautiful. The next afternoon, the gathered family sits around the walnut plank. It is diminished by the number of bodies around it, but longer than ever. The meal is both astonishing and unsurprising as my mother presides. I avoid the bourbon and talking about my life. I help clear up the dishes after the meal. Then we set out the pies. They are all perfect, especially the one she salvaged from my wincing efforts the night before. They are almost, but mercifully not, too much.
Hey, Bill Kittredge. Let's give him a hand, huh?
Well, I gotta be over in the light where I can see this. I don't have it memorized. Wrote it day before yesterday. It's not speaking in the microphone. Now I'm speaking in the microphone. This is a love story. I thought I should write a love story for this event. It's called Rhubarb Pie on Maker's Mark. A well-got-up beauty named Rhubarb Pie spotted her boyfriend, Maker's Mark, shooting pool at the Union Club with his cadre of never-done-anything notable youth. Shenanigans would soon be forthcoming as she stayed with her bar stool and her double margarita, watching them in the back bar. Despite an attempt to suppress her irritation at not being noticed, was she clearly ignored, Rhubarb sort of lost it. Spun on her stool, flounced her long blonde hair, and shouted, "Where in the fuck were you last night?" His comrades were crowding around Maker's Mark, hooping and blackslapping. He seemed to have triumphed in one of their mysteriously alluring contests. Rhubarb Pie hesitated while trying to gather her entire self and finally lunged off her bar stool, abandoning her double margarita and stomped up close beside the for some inane reason excited pool shooters. Panting, she shouted again, "You asshole, where were you last night?" Maker's Mark carefully racked his pool cue and faced her. "Last night," he said, "I was at the softball field over on Spurgeon Road, trying to write a poem for you. I got the idea from Richard Hugo poem about softball games that were played there, and the beautiful women who came out to watch. That's what he called them, the beautiful women." Alongside that pool table in that bar room in the Union Club, a Rhubarb Pie was no doubt going to be the subject of snickering local gossip. She'd have plated and smiled, breathed deep, and claimed what she really wanted. "You," she said to Maker's Mark, "can come over to my place when you're done fooling around here. I've got some rhubarb." "Yeah," Maker's Mark said, "bet you do."
Our next reader is Kate Lebo.
Yeah. All right, who's never seen a funeral pie before? All right, this is a funeral pie. I think this is the last piece. Is that right, Judy? There's 2 more pieces if you want one after this piece, or this piece I'm going to read, which is, this piece is for me, this piece is for you. Those 2 pieces are for you. Bob Wrigley, who's got the first poem in the Pie and Whiskey book, is obsessed with this pie. I am also obsessed with this pie, and I will show you why right now. All right. So I've never been served funeral pie at a funeral. I have eaten miniature lemon meringue pies, stacks of chocolate chip cookies, coffee cake hunks of indeterminable variety and inestimable age, but not what I am told is a German or maybe Amish tradition of funeral pie, also known as Rosina pie, also known as sour cream raisin. Perhaps I haven't been to enough funerals. It's a sweet made by farm mothers to trick their children into eating spoiled cream, says the second prize winner at the storytelling contest I host for the Iowa State Fair. I think of fruit as a symbol and reward of the passing seasons, which makes raisins, dried grapes that have refused to rot, stopped time. From what I can tell, it's called funeral pie because it's made with ingredients that are available year-round, which was handy in pre-refrigeration days when somebody croaked in January. The Iowans I've met who fondly remember it insist that funeral pie can't be properly made without a cow. Fresh cream gone bad, not the store-bought stuff. My first close encounter with funeral pie was in front of an audience. At the Iowa State Fair, food judging mostly takes place before a gathered crowd of competitors who sit in folding chairs, chatting amongst themselves in the air conditioning while they wait for a verdict. That first time at the fair, still an outsider, I was assigned the pies no one else seemed to want: gooseberry, rhubarb, and sour cream raisin. What is sour cream raisin? I asked Joanne, my note taker. Just be glad you didn't get mincemeat, she said. My first bite was underwhelming. Library paste is how Jen Bervin and Ron Silver of Bubby's Homemade Pies describe it. They weren't far off, though the description probably has more to do with the beige hue of the filling and the heavy cornstarch texture of some versions than with any whiff of actual glue. In other words, the pie was fine. It was one of those slices that doesn't knock you out, but it could comfort in a pinch. Sour cream raisin pie could even be a perfect symbol of the Iowa State Fair. Modest materials presented for this civic occasion as grandly as possible, tarted up and shown off in a culture where demanding attention tends to be frowned on, punished with gossip, and condemned as self-interest at the expense of the community. For those New York types, something's got to be in it for them, said one of my fellow judges. Are you East Coast elite or West Coast elite? A dry-humored rector asked me before I taught a pie class in the basement of his church. West Coast, I said, but my parents are from Iowa. You're probably wondering by now, so I'll tell you. If you want to bake a prize-winning sour cream raisin pie, be aware of these 5 dangers. First among them is the liberal use of spices, particularly cloves. I kind of want to hear what you think about this when I'm done, Judy, okay? So particularly cloves. This pie is supposed to be heavily spiced, but not so much that the filling tastes like a mouthful of essential oils. Cloves are particularly assertive when too concentrated and more noticeably off when old. So get a fresh jar and don't use more than a 1/4 teaspoon. The second danger is a soggy bottom crust, which can be solved by freezing the unfilled, unbaked crust for at least 10 minutes before filling it. Third, the filling must not be too cloyingly sweet. Reduce the sugar content in the filling of any given funeral pie to 1 cup total, no more. Serve this pie cold if possible. The sweet cream, spice, and dried fruit tastes get along, the sweet cream, spice, and dried fruit tastes get along a lot better if they've had some time to chill. All right, fourth is meringue, which I enjoy eating but avoid making, and so cannot command believable authority to help you with. I can tell you that the blue ribbon winner had a nice evenly brown pile of it on top of his or her entry, and that it was perfectly balanced with the heavier flavors below. All right, fifth, be hair aware. My first bite of funeral pie at the Iowa State Fair remained connected to its slice by a thin white strand of hair, so bright and so long that the front row gasped and sprang back as I brought the bite to my mouth. Is there a spider in my pie? I thought, and then I saw the hair, picked it off, slung the bite in the garbage, and spun the offending dessert 180 degrees, sliced a new triangle and sampled that, mustering the best stoned face I could for the benefit of the baker, who was almost certainly one of the horrified people in the audience. In my judging notes, I covered the hair in a feedback sandwich written in beautiful cursive by Joanne. Lovely presentation. Hair in pie, unfortunately. Buttery crust. Could have been more salty, but overall, pretty good. They really appreciate the feedback, Joanne assured me. I wanted mine to say this pie was a disaster, yes, but don't worry. At the Iowa State Fair, there's always next year. As I progressed through my sour cream and raisin feast, a bite from the tip to test filling, a bite from the end to test crust, 2 bites for only the best pies, I did not grow to love sour cream raisin pie so much as start to understand what it offered. This is a pie that tastes best once it's been wedded by memory to the circumstance of its serving. A funeral lunch, let's say, where the mourners are all cried out and ready to swap funny stories about their dead. I remember watching my uncle at his wife's funeral lunch, at the head of the head table with his daughter and son, their partners, their kids, him the fifth wheel, the uncoupled, presiding over us as he had at his wedding. He didn't have much of an appetite that day, but he kept his seat until the lunch was done. After the salads and sandwiches and soup, we were served something sweet that didn't demand attention, a brownie or cookie or something like that. It would have been the perfect time for funeral pie, except the name was perhaps too dark, too directly referential of the ritual we were about to finish, too much a reminder that when this was all over, we'd have to return to our daily lives where loss is not so easily accommodated. To expect a swoon-worthy performance of every sweet is to expect too much of sweetness. Sometimes dessert needs to soothe, not dazzle. Moving on is wrenching. Sugar helps. Thank you. All right, Sam Ligon, everybody.
The Pie and Whiskey book has writings about pie, writings about whiskey, writings about drugs and sex and Jesus. But it also has pie recipes and cocktail recipes. I'm going to read you some cocktail recipes based on American heroes. These are abbreviated from the Pie and Whiskey book. 4 classic American craft cocktails. 1, the Lonely Martha. Everyone knows that George Washington cut down his father's cherry tree with a hatchet and couldn't lie about it. What most people don't know is that he also chopped off Thomas Jefferson's hands with a gator knife and then pretended he didn't. Jefferson was furious, of course. He took a glove between his teeth and threw it on the floor at Washington's feet. Everyone was sad and surprised about Jefferson killing Washington with a dueling pistol when he didn't even have hands. But then Benjamin Franklin bucked America up by inventing electricity and a classic craft cocktail called the Lonely Martha. And everybody won. Ingredients: a shrub, a hatchet, whiskey, sweet vermouth, bitters, a cherry, dueling pistols. How to make a Lonely Martha. Find a shrub and chop it down with the hatchet. Admit that you've chopped it down. Now make a Manhattan. I use bourbon, but you can also use rye. Folks in Wisconsin use brandy. No one knows why. Some people insist a Manhattan must be served up, that ice must not melt in it. These people should be driven back to Portland. But wait, you're making a cocktail. Make the fucking cocktail. Admire the dueling pistols. Is the current president doing anything right? Who knows? Sip your drink and imagine how idiotic your face would look on money. 2, Emma Smith's revelation. When Joseph Smith told her that God wanted him to have a bunch of new wives, Emma was like, "You've got to be fucking kidding me." But it was all written out. God saying, "I command mine handmaid, Emma Smith, to abide and cleave unto my servant Joseph, and to none else. But if she will not abide this commandment, she shall be destroyed." That night, an angel of the Lord came to Emma and said, "God didn't really tell Joseph any of that. Joseph just wants to have sex with lots of women." And Emma was like, "But he said it wasn't about the sex." And the angel was like, "They always say that." And Emma was like, "But he said," and the angel was like, "Listen to me, Emma. Here's the revelation. Joseph is full of shit, okay? Remember what he said about matrimonial alliances with the natives? Mormon men taking native wives that their posterity may become white and delightsome? That's just fucking insane." Ingredients: a sister-wife chore wheel, whiskey, sweet vermouth, a Navy Colt revolver, bitters, his grandmother's china. How to make an Emma's revelation: place the sister-wife chore wheel on the table. Make a Manhattan. Bourbon or rye, doesn't matter. People in Wisconsin use brandy. Who cares? Arrange his grandmother's china on the counter, propped on little stands facing you. Sit at the table. Scribble salad plate over one window of the chore wheel, gravy boat over another. Yes, you loved him once. So what? Cry if you want to. Cry until you can't cry anymore. Make another drink. Spin the wheel. Raise the revolver. Aim at the appropriate piece of china. Everybody wants this. Even his grandmother. Even all those little girls he's lied to. Especially them. One more sip to steady your hand. Revelate. 3. The Sacagawea Sour. Everybody loved Lewis because he was beautiful and insane, and his first name was Meriwether. Clark was the problem. They were both problems, actually. But Clark would, quote, refresh the men with a glass of whiskey, then charge John Collins with getting drunk on his post out of whiskey put under his charge as sentinel, and for suffering Hugh Hall to draw whiskey out of said barrel. Let me tell you something about Hugh Hall. He was not suffering anything that morning until Clark whipped him while Lewis lay weeping in his tent. The idiots were always handing out flags and naming everything they saw as if nothing had ever been seen or named before. "I call this island Bad Humored Island," Clark would say, and I'd think, "I call this island Asshole Island." While Clark was having people whipped, Lewis was getting high and looking at plants and animals, smelling everything he touched, then looking at his hands and sniffing his fingers. It was a long trip, is what I'm trying to tell you. The idiot Clark would not stop calling me Janie. I was just like... Ingredients: 8 fluid drams laudanum, whiskey, sweet vermouth, a cherry, bitters. How to make a Sacagawea Sour. Just make the fucking drink, okay? You know how, it's a Manhattan, all right? Sit at the table. Look at the laudanum. Sip your drink. Say this under your breath: core of discovery. Shake your head. Smell your fingertips. Imagine the idiots whipping each other to pieces. Say it again: core of discovery. Scoff, mutter, drink. Promise yourself never to lead anyone anywhere ever again. 4. The last cocktail: Whitey on the Moon. Am I the only person here who hates space? I mean, it's nice at night and everything, stars, moons, planets, whatever, the northern lights, the southern lights, but who would want to go into space is what I want to know, when there's no oxygen, when your spacesuit's filled with your own urine. People went to the moon years ago to play golf and advance science. Something about Russians and freedom. David Bowie and Elton John competed to see who could sing sadder songs about being in space. Bowie won. A powdered breakfast drink was invented. It was America's golden age, and it seemed like it would never end. Ingredients: a recording of Gil Scott-Heron's Whitey on the Moon, whiskey, sweet vermouth, a cherry, bitters, hot water, toilets, lamps, Tang drink, your soul. How to make a Whitey on the Moon: put the music on loop. Dump 2 scoops of Tang into a champagne flute with cold water. Pour it down the drain. Make another one: 2 scoop Tangs, 1 cup water, pour it down the drain. If you're paying attention to the Gil Scott-Heron, you know this line. No hot water, no toilets, no lights, but whiteys on the moon. Gather the hot water, the toilet, the lights. Drive them away and get rid of them. Then come home and make a Manhattan. Keep listening to the Gil Scott-Heron. Say these words with him. A rat done bit my sister Nell with Whitey on the moon. Sip your drink. March your worn-out soul around the kitchen. If you think of yourself as a taxpayer first, a citizen second, try to figure out what the fuck is wrong with you. Pray for yourself. Pray for America. Maybe there's still time. Next reader is Lena Crow.
Thank you so much, Sam and Kate. Pie and Whiskey, definitely the greatest literary event in the Northwest, perhaps the world, I don't know. This is called The Butter People. The Butter People had become a problem. The Apple People were all right, though a little talkative for Gerald's liking. Same with the Berry People, all the Fruit People, for that matter. The Milk People took themselves too seriously. There were no sugar or flour people, so these items arrived by truck to the bakery, each week's delivery a source of shame to Ginny, who had wanted to use only local ingredients in her pies. All of this, though, would have been manageable were it not for the Butter People. Gerald had promised Ginny after he retired they would do whatever she wanted, her choice, 100%. What Ginny wanted was to live in Missoula, Montana, near their daughter and grandson, and to make pies, and sell pies, to make and sell pies. So be it. They bought a house, they leased a storefront downtown, they spent time with their daughter and her boy, and they made pies. Well, Ginny made pies. Gerald was the supply guy, as Ginny called him. That meant it was up to him to make sure Ginny had flour and sugar, fruit and chocolate, pecans and spices and milk. It was up to him to make sure she had fucking butter. Some people make their crust with lard instead, Gerald said when the trouble first started. Have you considered lard? But Ginny would not consider lard. I don't understand what the issue is, she said. And truth be told, neither did Gerald. At first, it had been just fine with the Butter People. He'd go out to their farm, Hale's it was called, and get the butter. But then one day, he was told by one of the Hale brothers that there was no butter in stock. So he went back the next day, and they only gave him half what he'd ordered. When he pointed this out, both brothers shrugged in unison. He returned again the third day, and this time they gave him cheese. They were also cheese people, the Butter People. But since Gerald didn't have a use for cheese, he never referred to them this way. This isn't what I want, he told the brothers. I need butter. You don't deserve butter, the older Hale said. What's that mean? It means what it means, the younger one said. Gerald left fuming. He went to see the Milk People. The Milk People were not siblings, but husband and wife. Do you make butter? Gerald asked. I'm sorry, we only do milk, the husband said. How much would I have to pay you to start making butter? We're really not set up for that, the wife said. It's a whole different thing. Not that different, though, Gerald said. Most dairies also do butter. And cheese, although I don't need cheese. I'm sorry, the husband said again. After that, Gerald told Ginny they would have to order butter in bulk, like they did the flour and the sugar. But Ginny said no. If there's local butter, I want to use it. It's important to me. So Gerald returned once more to the Butter People. Okay, what do I have to do to be deserving of the butter, he asked. You have to be the butter, the older brother said. And the cow, said the younger brother. You also have to be the cow. And the butter churn, said the older one. Do you mean literally or figuratively? Both, said the brothers. That doesn't make any goddamn sense, Gerald said. Okay, just be the cow then, the older brother said. That still doesn't make any goddamn sense, Gerald said, and he left again without butter. That night, Gerald and Ginny had dinner with another baker, a woman who made cookies. What do you know about the Hale brothers? Gerald asked her. I get my butter from them, she said. Such sweet boys. But don't you think they're strange? Gerald pressed. "Oh no, I think they're just sort of free spirits, in touch with nature and auras and all that. One of them told me I had a nice aura once." "They don't like Gerald's aura," Ginny said. The cookie baker seemed like she had something to add to this, but was working very hard to politely keep her mouth shut instead. "Do you want me to go get the butter?" Ginny asked. It was the end of the day, and his wife, dusted in flour and smelling of sugar and sweat, was clearly tired. Gerald thought of all Ginny had done to support him during his career, how she'd worked her own job, plus cleaning, cooking, taking care of their daughter, while he worked 70 hours a week, how she'd dressed to the nines for all his stupid company parties, and how the day after Gerald's retirement, she'd held his hand while he cried over his crossword puzzle, saying, "I don't know what my purpose here is anymore. Do you think I've wasted my entire..." And she told him, "No, shut up. We're starting a new chapter. Nothing's wasted." And they had, and it was nice. Missoula was nice, with its mountain and river. He liked being with his little grandson, growing so fast through stages he'd missed almost entirely with his daughter, who seemed to finally have forgiven Gerald for his absence, happy to have him nearby now. So no, Gerald did not want Ginny to go get the butter. It was his one job at the bakery, and he was going to do it. He went back to the butter people. "Okay," he said, "I'm ready to literally and figuratively be the butter or the cow or the churn or whatever." "Not whatever," the older brother said, "the cow." Then the younger brother gave him a cowbell and led him to the pasture and pointed to a spot near some real cows. "Stand there," he said, then he walked away. Gerald held the bell and stood. He wasn't sure what he was supposed to do. It made him angry. How is this even like being a cow? Gerald thought he should at least wear a cow costume and moo. If they wanted to embarrass him, they really ought to make him moo. But there was no one nearby to hear his mooing. He tried one short moo just to see. The cows didn't pay him any attention. They were nice-looking cows, black and white ones like on TV. Gerald stared at the cows for a long time. He realized he had to pee. He didn't think he should leave the pasture, so he unzipped his pants and peed where he stood. One of the cows peed too. Gerald found this satisfying, this shared pee experience. He stood and stared and held his bell, and when he got tired of standing, he sat down, but none of the other cows were sitting, of course, so he adjusted to his hands and knees. The damp grass soaked through his pants. It felt kind of nice. He wondered if he just had to be a cow for the day to get the butter, or would it be an ongoing thing? Would he have to work out a cow schedule with the Hales? 9 to 5 cow? He jingled his bell. He tried another moo. He decided, whatever the arrangement, it would be just fine. He'd do it, and Ginny would understand. He told himself it was for her after all. Thank you.
Tiffany Midge.
Hello. Hi. Are there any natives here tonight? One. Wow. One. If that's Cindy, thank you for the ride here. Okay. This piece is called Apple Pie Problems, and it'll become apparent soon. I don't do white, Luna pronounced one evening over a glass of wine and a cigarette on her patio. Luna's all smug. She married Raphael, married brown, and was unapologetically vocal about wanting her kids to look just like her. Brown, burnt sienna, russet. Her idea of family planning was like going to the hardware store and picking out paint samples. Sometimes I wondered if this was her reason for having children, as mere ego extensions, as accessories, like a good bag, a good brown bag. When Luna first announced her pregnancy with 1.0, I leaned in conspiratorially and asked, "Is it Raphael's?" "What? You don't do white? You mean white food, white clothes, white furniture, white wine? I know it's so hard to wash out." White dudes, Lil, she professed as if a point of honor. You should put that on your resume. Some people, on the other hand, Luna said, pointing a hot pink fingernail at me, sleep with the enemy. I don't know how they face the mirror in the morning. Oh, well, that's easy. It's how some of us exact revenge on the colonizer. Sometimes I'll date white men just to destroy them. It's a form of resistance. You're so full of shit, little Miss Apple Pie. Apples. What natives who are red on the outside and white on the inside get called. A slur, usually, or what our father teasingly called our mother, his term of affection, apple pie. This coming from Luna, who was fond of saying, I like my men like I like my fry bread, round, brown, and greasy. She may as well have been talking about apple pie. Luna's lackluster attitude about love explained why it had taken 8 years of living together, not to mention producing 2 children, before she finally agreed to marry Raphael. At her wedding shower, someone had asked what made them decide to finally get married after all that time, and Luna said, I gave him an ultimatum. Oh, really? You told him to put a ring on it or else? No, he wanted to get married. It was me who didn't want to. Why not? I told him he needed to get a personality. Luna's bluntness caused a room full of women to chortle nervously. Someone pretend choked on her cheesecake. What can I say? I have needs. I need to be entertained. Eligible Native men are rare. They're considered unicorns. If they're reasonably attractive, which is code for having front teeth, and if they're gainfully employed, not in prison, not married to any of your cousins, and haven't imprinted sexually on a blonde white woman, finding someone copper, burnt sienna, or russet beat the odds. While Luna had wrangled a brown man, it wasn't a perfect match, since he was Mexican. He was still Indio, but a different culture. He didn't powwow or walk the red road, for instance. However, he did cook up a mean pot of menudo, and if it wasn't for him, I probably would have known the term pendejo, which, when used in appropriate circumstances, has added years to my life. John, who is my current Bisky crew eggshell boyfriend, admitted his attraction to Pacific Rim phenotypes, or what he described as Eskimo variations. When we first met, he imagined me as a Native American Pippi Longstocking, only an erotic version, Pippi Leatherstocking, inspired from Fenimore Cooper's Leatherstocking Tales. In turn, I admitted to John that what attracted me to him was his Northern European exoticism, how I found Caucasian men to be a delicacy, like pufferfish or monkey brains, that I objectified his ability to grow facial hair, his amazing superpower for reaching high cupboards, how easily he commands service in restaurants, and how border guards and TSA agents wave him through as if he's a Jedi master. These are not the droids you're looking for. My Native friends, they'd done all the math. I'm half, so if I get with an Ivory Frost cloud guy, my kids will be a quarter, and so on and so on. We've all felt that pressure. When I used to date Clay, a Chippewa Cree, one of my Native friends said, wow, an Indian guy, as in good job, as in you fulfilled your social and biological imperative. Once at a powwow, sitting around a picnic table with a group of Native women, we catcalled all of the Native men walking by. There goes your sperm donor. Hey, come on over, you missed the donation station. Welcome to the all-service Native American Bank. Want to make a deposit? Cackling like jackals. If you do finally land a Native guy, Luna told me, as if I was deep sea fishing for marlin with Papa Hemingway, make sure he's not one of those motorcycle jacket wearing gearheads, or else your love affair will go sour like in the movie Grease. Danny's all bad boy, certified Indian skin who's always organizing free Leonard Peltier rallies. But that all changed when this super old school Sandy came into his life. Sandy could talk to coyotes like Dr. Doolittle. So sweet she'd rot your teeth just being in the same room. She runs the elder program on the res. Let's call it fry bread grease. I prefer to view life through the lens of Rizzo. Slutty and unapologetic about it. Life and dating is hard enough just for the regular types, the buffs, ecrues, beiges, and then add the complications of ethnicity and culture into the works, and suddenly you're confronted with a theorem needing a rocket scientist and a soothsayer. Luna considers the Twilight Wolfpack to be an allegory for dating Native men. Think about it. They're all elusive, all fur, teeth, and claws. Fur, teeth, and claws? What are you talking about? Are you thinking of native guys or Sasquatch? And hiding out in the forest, eating things you'd rather not know about. And even if one sets his sights on you, and even if you're agreeable to the whole paranormal element, you're still screwed because it's likely they've imprinted on a white woman whose face only makes one expression. That's why all the monsters flock to her. They have a pool going to see who can change her facial expression. It's like an airplane seat. It only shifts in barely discernible millimeters. A girl like Bella can't ever appreciate the sort of cultural currency that a wolf pack guy brings to the table, and that's probably why she prefers the undead. What are you even talking about? I said, laughing. Do you hear yourself? Native police. It's the wine talking, Luna said. Not every native has been fortunate enough to peel back that foil wrapper to reveal a golden ticket. The love of my life sans fur, teeth, and claws. Coming to a Lifetime movie near you. But then again, who has? Thank you.
Our next reader is Donald Ray Pollock.
I want to thank everybody for coming out. This is a heck of a crowd. I didn't realize there'd be this many people here. So anyway, this is the beginning from an old story, and it's called Real Life. My father showed me how to hurt a man one August night at the Torch Drive-In when I was 7 years old. It was the only thing he was ever any good at. This was years ago, back when the outdoor movie experience was still a big deal in southern Ohio. Godzilla was playing, along with some sorry-ass flying saucer movie that showed how pie pans could take over the world. It was hotter than a fat lady's pie that evening, and by the time the cartoon began playing on the big plywood screen, the old man was miserable. He kept bitching about the heat, sopping the sweat off his head with a brown paper bag. Ross County hadn't had any rain in 2 months. Every morning, my mother turned the kitchen radio to KB 98 and listened to Miss Sally Flowers pray for a thunderstorm. Then she'd go outside and stare at the empty white sky that hung over the holler like a sheet. Sometimes I still think about her standing in that brittle brown grass, stretching her neck in hopes of seeing just one lousy dark cloud. "Hey, Vernon, watch this," she said that night. Ever since we'd parked, she'd been trying to show the old man that she could stick a hot dog down her throat without messing up her shiny lipstick. You've got to understand, my mother hadn't been out of knock 'em stiff all summer. Just seeing a couple of red lights and made her all goosey. But every time she gagged on that wiener, the ropey muscles in the back of my old man's neck twisted a little tighter, made it seem as if his head was going to pop off any second. My older sister, Jeanette, had used her head and played sick all day, then talked him into letting her stay at a neighbor's house. So there I was, stuck in the back seat by myself, chewing the skin off my fingers and hoping Mom wouldn't piss him off too much before Godzilla stomped the guts out of Tokyo. But really, it was already too late. Mom had forgotten to pack the old man's special cup, and so everything was shot in the ass as far as he was concerned. He couldn't even muster a chuckle for Popeye, let alone get excited about his wife doing tricks with a wrinkled up Oscar Mayer. Besides, my old man hated movies. Screw a bunch of make-believe, he'd say whenever someone mentioned seeing the latest John Wayne or Robert Mitchum. What the hell's wrong with real life? He'd only agreed to the drive-in in the first place because of all the hell Mom had raised about his new car, a 1965 Impala he'd brought home the night before. It was the third set of wheels in a year. We lived on soup beans and fried bread, but drove around knockin' stiff like rich people. Just that morning, I'd heard my mother get on the phone and rag to her sister, the one who lived in town. "The son of a bitch is crazy, Margie," she said. "We couldn't even pay the electric bill last month." I was sitting in front of the dead TV, watching watery blood trickle down her pale calves. She tried to shave them with the old man's straight razor, but her legs were like sticks of butter. A black fly kept buzzing around her bony ankles, dodging her mad slaps. "I mean it, Margie," she said into the mouthpiece. "I'd be out of this hellhole in a minute if it wasn't for these kids." As soon as Godzilla started, the old man pulled the ashtray out of the dash and poured a drink in it from his bottle. "Good Lord, Vernon," my mom said. She was holding the hot dog in midair, getting ready to have another go at it. "Hey, I told you, I ain't drinking from no bottle. You start that shit, you end up a goddamn wino." He took a slug from the ashtray, then gagged and spit a soggy cigarette butt out the window. He'd been at it since noon, showing off the new ride to his good time buddies. There was already a dent in one of the side panels. After a couple more sips from the ashtray, the old man jerked the door open and swung his skinny legs out. Puke sprayed from his mouth, soaking the cuffs of his blue work pants with old granddad. The station wagon next to us started up and moved to another spot down the road. He hung his head between his legs for a minute or two, then rose up and wiped his back of his hand across his chin. "Bobby," he said to me, "one more of your mama's greasy taters and they'll be planting your old daddy." My old man didn't eat enough to keep a rat alive, but any time he threw up his whiskey, he blamed it on Mom's cooking. Mom gave up, wrapped the hot dog in a napkin and handed it back to me. "Remember, Vernon," she warned, "you got to drive us home." "Shoot," he said, lighting a cigarette. "This car drives its own self." Then he tipped up the ashtray and finished off his drink. Thank you.
Our next reader is Pragita Sharma.
It's great to be here. It's such a big crowd. Okay, I'm going to speak up. Okay. Well, I love pies, and I'm getting used to whiskey. It was nice to be able to write this poem. This is My Pie and Your Whiskey for Dale. I love pie as much as you loved whiskey. I don't know which heady sin showed up on our respective faces or formed our bodies. Or in our lethargy, sweet souring senses were dispersed among many faulty feelings. Or which one of us dreamed of either a bittersweet lifeline or failure and to perish, or a teeming glint of the desiring kiss that built and unbuilt the hard feelinged burden of losing principles that fell to the side with long love or mutable will. A phantasmic banana cream dream you traded in for an incandescent tumbler, coppered completely into future laments, into you no longer being in any vice I can find.
next reader is Jane Smiley.
Hi, thanks for having me. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, I'm going to read an excerpt from Some Luck, which is the first volume of my trilogy. It goes year by year, and this is in 1950. When Rubino called him up around the 1st of October and said he had $7,000 for him, Frank couldn't believe his ears. Rubino was living in Washington Heights for the time being, so Frank met him at a bar not far from the old Sperry plant in Lake Success. As he entered the bar and peered around for Rubino, Frank decided that probably Rubino was in the neighborhood because he had some plan for the Sperry plant, which was now housing the United Nations while that building was under construction. If Rubino could screw a dime out of each of the United Nations, Frank thought he would consider it his greatest victory. As soon as Rubino saw Frank, he patted his jacket over the pocket. But Frank knew anyway that he was going to have to talk the little wop out of his money. Rubino was in a good mood and deep into his third scotch and soda. Frank ordered a martini. Frank said, "What's going on here at Lake Success? This whole neighborhood's wearing little hats. I didn't think it was your kind of place." Yarmulkes, they're called yarmulkes, and you're going to learn how to say that word and a dozen others if you're going to stop sounding like the rube you are. Like what? Like schmuck. I know what a schmuck is. Private. They both took another sip of their drinks. Rubino patted his jacket again. Then he said, "I got another idea. I want to see the fruits of the first idea." Rubino leaned on the bar and looked up at Frank, then slipped his hand inside the jacket and pulled out an envelope. The envelope was fat. He set it on Frank's knee and said, "You lucked out, Corporal." "I should hope so." Rubino shrugged, finished his drink, and said, "Not everyone did. Turnpike could have gone another way. We bought some property along that right away, too." He lifted a finger. When the bartender came over, he ordered another scotch. Frank had never seen him drink this much and guessed that was why he had let it out about the other investment. "I'm not going to count it right now." "Do what you want, Corporal, but I'm telling you, this place around here, you have a look at it. You know what? It's moving closer to the city. For that reason, it's filling right up. Good air, view of the bay. Sid Caesar lives here. You know who that is?" Frank shook his head. "Funniest guy now living. You've heard of the Marx brothers, anyway." "Maybe." "They live here, too. I'm looking at 4 lots. Big ones. Enough for 6 houses, anyway, because they're all contiguous. We hold on to those for a year, and we triple our dough." "How much dough are we tripling?" "You put in your 7, you triple that." "How much are you putting in?" 10, more or less. "I'll think about it," said Frank. "Well, stop thinking about it tomorrow because I got to make the offer." "One of those Levittown houses is $8,000, free and clear." "You don't make money on where you live," said Rubino. Frank wouldn't have said that he was actually angry when they walked out of the bar 15 minutes later. It was another one of those feelings he had that he didn't understand. He had felt the envelope safely. He had the envelope safely in his own inside pocket, and because it was cold, he'd buttoned his jacket and wrapped a scarf around his neck. They walked along. Down the street, Frank could see the blue Pontiac parked alongside a blank brick wall, the streetlight glaring across it, turning it the color of sand. And maybe that was what triggered him. His own Studebaker was around the corner. Rubino put his hand in his coat pocket and pulled out his keys. A moment after that, Frank had him pinned against the brick wall with his forearm at his neck, the way Rubino himself had once pinned Lieutenant Martin at Monte Cassino. Was that really only 6 years ago? And as Rubino had done then, Frank felt his pockets for a weapon which he did not find. He said, I don't want to be one of those investors who lost their money because you put it into the wrong piece of property, Rubino. Alex. Rubino struggled. Frank pressed harder. Rubino gagged. Frank was 6 inches taller and certainly outweighed the other man by 30 or 40 pounds. Frank said, I've learned a lot from you, Private. Rubino's arm flew out, but Frank caught it and pressed it against the wall. He said, I just want to be clear about my intentions. If everyone loses, I don't mind losing too. I understand that. But if you gain, I gain. Got it? Rubino gagged again, and Frank let him loose, just a little. Rubino coughed and then said in a hoarse voice, I would never screw you, Corporal. You should know that. I will never forget you said that, Private. Rubino put his hand to his neck and stretched his head upward, and then nodded. Frank said, You okay to drive? Rubino shrugged but got into his car. He didn't seem all that surprised by what had happened, but he did seem a little more sober. Thank you.
Got it? All right, our last reader of the night is Maya Jewel Zeller.
Thank you all for being here, and thanks to Kate and Sam and Carla for the festival. And I'm really, really glad we're at the Union Club and that we're getting bar things happening in the pieces, because part of this poem takes place in a bar. Story problems. The square root of whiskey is water. The square root of you is your father. You follow him down the hallway where he turns left and left again into a wall. He slumps there half drunk. He stands half awake. He banks his shot off the rail into the side pocket. It's cutthroat you're playing, not like the fish, but the billiards game with the hard balls, the cue stick slightly warped so it wobbles when you check it. The square root of a cue is warped by water. The square root of Jesus is water into beer. That's the way the story is told here, thanks Sam, where the square root of beer is your father, himself the square root of God. He knocks another in, so you're stranded over here by the corner with your balls nearly touching, like Adam reaching. Here, the square root of morning is Adam punching God in the face. In this part of America, Adam punches God in the face. It's almost morning. The sun sneaks around the darkness and creases in the blanket your mother has hung to keep out the light. Somewhere above you, the stars blink off, and you know there's work to be done, a cord of wood to split and stack, your brother's back to bend. The square root of your mother is waiting for you in the dim of her room, naming ferns for the sister you hope will come out of the woods. The trees there are square, their roots square, their leaves. You've been playing all night while the rain falls and the river gets higher. You may or may not make it home on these roads. If you do, you may or may not find it in flames. But the billiards game, the name of the third player evades you. It may be the devil. It may be the square root of a story, an equation, an imaginary number spiraling off the edge of the page. Home may be the square root of these roads. The roads are full of the dark squares of sky they've been named for. In the field full of water, where nothing is named for itself, the days are only hours long. You reach for your mother, who holds out a fern. It's a maidenhair. You're that close. You're drunk on the possibility of going somewhere. The square root of the river breaches the square root of its banks. Thanks.
Damn. Maya Zeller. Thank you to the writers. They kicked ass tonight. Woo! Thank you to the Union Club, this bar. Thank you to the pie makers. Thank you to the audience, to you all. There's more pie back there. There's some more booze back there. You should buy a little bit more. Tip the bartenders. Get pie, tip the bartenders, have one more drink or two.
That's it. That is it. Do that.
Thank y'all for coming out.
Yeah.